Closing out now. I had the pleasure of making this film with Mountain Lake PBS. It went across the country on bullying in 2005. It's called Disrespect, the Impact of Bullying. Here's a 30-second clip from that, and then I'm going to close out with a little story for you, okay? And also, I should tell you, how many of you have heard of a movie called The Bro Code? Okay. Or The Empathy Gap. Okay, these are two films by a Media Education Foundation filmmaker, Dr. Thomas Keith. And Tom has chosen my book for his fourth film. So this is my first film, and here's one of the closeout clips. I was in high school. I sat on the bus with a guy named Ricardo Howe, and he was a bigger kid than everyone else, and for some reason he liked me. He came and sat next to me and had a little penknife. And with this penknife, he would jab people in the leg. And he would laugh and get a kick out of it. And I knew it was wrong. But I kind of chuckled with it too, because I was happy he wasn't jabbing me in the leg. Even though I saw him go from person to person, pricking people in the leg with his little penknife. Nobody had the courage to stand up to him and challenge him about that. And I probably could have made a difference. I was too afraid to challenge him because I didn't want to all of a sudden become the one who got pricked. But if I had thought about it enough, I could have made the difference. Because maybe he respected me enough where if I had challenged him, he would have stopped. But I didn't challenge him. I didn't challenge him because at that time, I didn't have the voice. I was a coward. I was weak. That's real. And that haunts me like you will not believe, which is why every student that comes into the campus sees this image at the end of that presentation, and then I just own it. And I tell them one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing now is because of what I didn't do then. So here's a story I'm going to end with for you to process as you leave. I call it, Upon Discovering a Worm Inside the Apple, What Would You Do? I was riding with my son, Justin, on the A train towards Brooklyn some months ago. About 10 minutes into that 30-minute ride, something became quite obvious. Though I was immersed in the project of assisting my son with transferring data, I was still checking everything out. Why was I checking everything out? It's a point I made earlier. Because one of the first rules of engagement I learned in the hood was that while many black folk in America can share in the lack of certain privileges, all black folk lack the privilege of being clueless. We cannot afford the luxury of not being aware of our surroundings. Consequently, people were all of a sudden anxiously moving, stealthily whispering, and yet, interestingly enough, many of them were also smirking, chuckling, or even laughing. It all of a sudden had me wondering what could contribute to so many strangers all being on the same page. Eventually, I discovered it was a very tall woman who looked disoriented, perhaps under the influence of drugs, perhaps with some form of mental disability, perhaps both. I noticed her as a person under scrutiny more so when all eyes followed her as she walked down past my son and I. It took a moment beyond recognizing her as what Du Bois articulated, which I showed you earlier, was a problem for most around her. It took a while for me to discover why. When she passed by us, I felt her movement, but I wasn't looking at her. So 5 to 10 seconds later, I detected a very offensive odor. I couldn't attribute it to one specific person at the time. However, about 30 seconds later, I noticed her once again gathering herself for a move. This time I was more attentive to her movement, and as a result realized that the disarming stench I had smelled earlier was coming from her. Then I noticed what appeared to be some type of large brown stain that looked like dried feces upon the back of her dress. At this point, I realized what all the earlier commotion had been about. Sitting next to her would have been torturous, to say the least. More than a minute had passed, and yet the scent was lingering powerfully enough to make you nauseous. Remembering the range of reactions people were giving her, I turned to my son, Justin, and said, "Please don't let anyone know that you and I are discussing her, and more so, please don't contribute to embarrassing her on any level." He nodded his head in support. It was immediately after that when I noticed a family of 4, a woman, man, and 2 children all huddled together in their seats. The woman, probably the mother, holding the boy, was laughing and whispering something in the boy's ears, which made him smile, smirk, and chuckle. Often she glanced towards the man. Their eyes would simultaneously gravitate towards the tall woman, then back towards one another with something that felt like a shared wink and a smile. This same woman, with her boy, her son, had earlier been searching for eye contact from me when our seating area of passengers all experienced her scent. I chose then not to nurture what I surmised as her insensitivity. But now I had no choice, because the combination of watching people laughing at this woman, whom they knew nothing about, combined with modeling behavior my son would benefit from, had me finding myself trying to figure out the best course of action. It was then that I fully realized I needed to make a statement to more people than just the smiling woman with a child. "Excuse me, miss, but do you speak English?" I asked in a voice loud enough to reach others with my message, reaching the tall woman. "Yes, I do," she said. "Good. Then I must say that I hope you or anyone else who may be apt to laugh at an unfortunate person must know that the person they are laughing at would prefer to be immersed in a different reality. I doubt very seriously if her reality today is by choice." The woman, surprised to say the least, muttered that she wasn't laughing, but completely lost any semblance of a smile thereafter. After I said that, I felt my anger dissipate and respect emanate from others on the train. My son shook his head in momentary light disbelief, recognizing quickly that he shouldn't have been surprised. This is how his dad, more often than not, rolls. He then smiled approvingly. Later, though, at my hotel room, I shared the story with some of my visiting students. And in the middle of telling the story, just like now, I again became so overwhelmed with emotion that it was very difficult to hold back the tears. Later, on my train ride home, I could barely see my keystrokes from the deluge of tears welling up in my eyes as I attempted to write and ultimately be able to share this with others. Why? Why did I have tears? Because I will never understand how we can laugh at each other's pain, how we can be entertained by each other's struggle. That woman is and was someone's daughter, sister, mother, lover, cousin, niece. She's a sentient human being. I then realized that my tears were not just for her, but for the human condition. We are far too often inconsiderate cowards when we need to be considerate leaders and allies. Every one of you hearing me now should be asking yourself, what would you have done in the same situation? If you are unsure, ask yourself how many of you would really appreciate someone riding to your rescue. My tears were also probably related to all the times I could have and should have said something and didn't. Shame on me for at least some of those times, knowing that different contexts dictate different realities. We talked about that, Joe. My tears may have also been for my actions, which could possibly be construed as bullying by some. I hate, and that's a strong word, that we live in a world where I even feel the need to have to challenge someone like this. And lastly, perhaps my tears are symbolic of the hope of creating a world of allies who will help the woman deemed a problem find help, while consistently challenging others to be more considerate of others' realities as we step into our leadership moments. I think a big part of the reason why that's such a tough story for me is it takes me back to my mom and how people might have judged her at 22 with 4 kids. And how many people out there are experiencing what that woman experienced. We can change the game, but we have to lean in and get serious about it and get out of our spaces of comfort and understand that there's a lot of people out there who need allies. A lot, like every single person in this room. And so if you want an ally, you need to be an ally. That's all I have for you today.